Hey there, folks. I hope you're ready because in today's episode, we're going to be doing the much anticipated review of the CELR-12 culinary cooler module, a unit that makes a lot of bold claims, like the claim that it can take your home ice chest and turn it into a refrigerator, or a dry aging chamber, or a dry curing chamber, the kind that you would make salami, prosciutto, culatello in. What about a cheese cave, a fermenter to make wine, beer, sake, kimchi, sauerkraut? How about a dehydrator, a proofing oven, a low temperature oven? Can it actually do all these things? We're about to find out. Let's go.
All right, guys, let's take a look at what's in the box. Now, what Tablesmith sent me is called the Ultimate System. This is everything that they have, and you do have the option to just get the CELR-12 culinary cooler module if you want to, but since they sent me the Ultimate System, we'll take a look at what's included. All right, so first is the base station and the block. If you were to just get the CELR-12, this is what you would get. This base station is basically the heart and soul of the operation. Everything that controls the temperature is inside this unit, and then right here this red knob will allow you to increase or decrease the temperature. Now over here we have the block, and as you can see we've got basically 3 cables that plug into the base station, and the block is what translates the information into actual hot or cold air. And so that's basically how the unit operates, and this little red piece right here is what catches the moisture that's coming off of the block. So notice we have no holes on one side, we have holes on the other. The claim is that if you put the holes towards the outside, you can increase the humidity, and then if you put the holes on the inside, you can decrease the humidity. And so in a minute, we're going to see how that actually works as we run different modes and give it a test. As far as the block goes, looks like it uses thermoelectric modules to heat and cool, which will be fun to see how that works out. Okay. That's the base station and the plate. Now let's go ahead and look at what else comes in this kit. It looks like you've got a grating. Now this will go on the bottom of your ice chest when you do, things like whole muscle curing or even dry aging. This is the Tablesmith recipe journal that comes with the Ultimate System. You're going to get some bamboo rods and some brackets. Now this part right here is technically part of their charcuterie kit. Personally speaking, I think the rods are a little thin, so depending on what you're hanging, you might want to double up those rods to make them a little more sturdy, or just get a bigger rod to begin with. Here is the netting and the twine. That's part of the charcuterie kit. Those come in handy. And then we've got a little thing of accessories. We've got a pipe cleaner and an Allen wrench. Of course, we've got here a little funnel. That's to add water to your unit, to your base station if you need to. This little piece right here, this is to check the water level in your base station in the event that you're running low and you need to add more water. We also have the hanger plate that has double-sided sticky tape that connects the block to the ice chest. There's also a few screws included in the event that you want to mount it, which is a slightly more secure fit. But this is what it's basically going to look like. This is going to fit right in there snug, and it will sit on the sidewall of your ice chest. In the Ultimate System, there's also a pecan cutting board that's a little unique. Notice we have these spikes that screw into the pecan cutting board just like that, and this lets you place your charcuterie directly on top, securely fastening it, and then you can do your up and down vertical cuts, which is kind of interesting. The last part of the Ultimate System is the cheese kit, and in this kit you get a bamboo mat. You also get some cheesecloth as well as a cheese mold. Now the CELR-12 claims to be able to maintain the appropriate temperature for not only making charcuterie, but for making cheese, which kind of makes sense because you can make cheese and salami and dry cured meats in the same environment. So there we have it. Make your cheese, put it in the mold, set it on the mat, and let the chamber do the rest. Okay, that's what was in the Ultimate System. Let's go ahead and get our Arctic 45 ice chest set up. Notice that we have the bracket already on the sidewall. I am using the double-sided sticky tape. And then I've got 3 cables, 2 water cables and 1 power cable that need to be fed through the 3/4 inch hole there at the bottom. Now, if the hole that you have is a little bit smaller, they do include some brackets that do allow you to remove those fittings and then slide it in there, but 3/4 inch is recommended. Okay, let's go ahead and mount the block onto the side of the cooler. Very good. Easy to install. Gotta like that. Let's go ahead and take a look at the base station. Our 3 cables are available and unhindered. We're going to plug the connector into the back of the base station. You can't plug it in direct. You got to lift it up at an angle and then push it in, and that kind of locks it into place. So now that is plugged in. We'll plug that into the wall here once we're completely finished. As far as the cables go, pretty self-explanatory. The water cables are going to go in first, and it doesn't really matter which one you plug into which ports, but I'm going to push it in and give it a twist. See that? We're also going to do the same here. So we're going to push it in and then give it a twist. We want those pegs, by the time we're finished, to be, facing left and right. That locks it into place. As far as the power connection goes, it has a little notch to denote how it should be plugged in. So we're just going to push that in, and our CELR-12 is officially set up. Let's plug it in, and this is the home screen. All right, so at first glance, you're going to notice the numbers cycle. What the unit tells you is the actual temperature inside your ice chest and the actual humidity inside your ice chest. So in this particular case, 68 Fahrenheit and 54% humidity is what's going on inside the ice chest. You can change the temperature by rotating this red knob right or left. And if you turn the knob to the right, you'll increase, and obviously if you turn it to the left, you will decrease. As far as the temperature range, let's see how hot it gets. We're in that 100 degree. This right here is all fermentation temperature. So if you do anything like kimchi, beer, wine, anything like that, salami, that's a great temperature to be at. Now we're in the 120. All right. We'll see if it can actually hit those temperatures. Right now we're just looking at the range. 145. Okay, 145 is the hottest that this unit claims to get. And then, of course, when we go in the opposite direction, let's see what the low end of that number is. Now we're into dry curing temperatures right here. 54, 55. This is cheese, salami territory. All right. 39, 38. This is refrigerator territory. Very good. And then, of course, we can get to below refrigerator territory. Nice. 28. Very good. So 28, I think, is going to be on the low end. 27 offers a mode that when the screen reads full, it just gives you constant below refrigerator temperatures. And we'll talk and show you what that looks like here and towards the end of this video. But for right now, we are going to be dry curing some meat. So 55 degrees Fahrenheit is the temperature I want to set it to. Currently, there's nothing in the unit. You can see the temperature inside the ice chest has spiked to 96 Fahrenheit, and the humidity has dropped down to 47%. When I put my hand over the block, I can definitely feel nice, cool air blowing over my hand. So it's going to be interesting to see how this unit can handle the temperature inside the ice chest. And regarding the drip tank, I'm going to place that whole side out so that we can get nice elevated humidity for the charcuterie. That's exactly what we're looking for. So in addition to that, I am going to place a thermohygrometer, which is going to measure the temperature swings as well as the humidity swings during the entire process of us dry curing. We're looking probably at about a 2-month process here, so we'll show you that data here in a minute. This is what our rods look like, and like I said, if you're not hanging anything too heavy, they should be fine. We did put a relatively heavy copa towards the end of this process, and I did have to double up. It feels nice and cool inside this unit, and I am loving that. And at this point, some time has passed, probably 3 or 4 weeks. The temperature inside the ice chest has been holding pretty steady at around 54 Fahrenheit. And notice the humidity, it's hovering around that 89-90% range. We'll talk more about that elevated humidity towards the end of this video. And trust me when I tell you, it is certainly not a problem. Let's open up the ice chest and take a look at what's going on inside. Now, if you've seen any of the other 4 videos that go into detail regarding the projects that we have right here currently, so it's a tenderloin, a pancetta, we also have a smoked loin, and a copa, you'll know how they already turned out, but I'll show you the results of those here in a second. Now, one thing I did do is I added the screws to that mounting plate. I found that the elevated humidity made it difficult for the double-sided sticky tape to, stay sticky on the side of that ice chest. So I added the 4 screws, and I haven't had a problem since. The goal when it comes to dry curing meat is to keep an environment that allows for proper flavor development. So in our case, it's around 55 Fahrenheit, and elevated humidity, which slows the drying process down. As I give this a squeeze, I'm loving how it feels. So what I'm going to do is just show you the results of all 4 of those projects back to back, and then we're going to move on to some of the different modes. Okay, all 4 projects are finished, and I could say with 100% certainty that the CELR-12 successfully converted my ice chest into a dry curing chamber. Nice cool air kept the temperature roughly around 55 Fahrenheit with a very small swing, and the humidity, albeit a little higher than I normally like, worked. Let me show you what the temperature and the humidity data looks like. Over the last week, we averaged 56 Fahrenheit with a high of 57 and a low of 54. Absolutely beautiful. In the humidity world, we had an average of 88 with a high of 91 and a low of 83%. Don't pay a lot of attention to the red and the blue because the only reason it's showing up red is due to a setting that I put into the system and I just never bothered to change it. So that's kind of irrelevant. When we look at the data over the entire time that we were curing meat, so this is basically over a 6-week period, give or take, we see very consistent results. The temperature average is 54 Fahrenheit, and the humidity average is roughly about 90%. Now, I don't pay a lot of attention to the highs and lows because those are generally reflective of me opening up the chamber, digging around in there, leaving it open, whatever. And so you'll see temperature spikes, humidity drops, things like that. But overall, I really thought that the average humidity and temperature was perfect for what we were trying to do. What we're going to do now is test some of the different functions of the CELR-12. I'm going to increase this to fermentation temperature. Fermentation temperature, depending on what you're making, can be anywhere from 65 Fahrenheit on up. For instance, 90 degrees is great if you're doing snack sticks, pepperoni, summer sausage, Lebanon bologna, things like that, because you're going to get fast, quick acidification at those higher temperatures. Starter cultures like FLC, FRM52, or LHP dry really appreciate these hotter temperatures. 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Shoot, you can even take it up to 105 and you're going to get that really beautiful quick acidification. If you drop it down to, let's say, below 90, maybe 75 to 90, well, now you're in that temperature zone that makes beautiful Italian or Mediterranean salami. Flavor of Italy works great between 75 and 85. You can even use TSPX down to 65 if you want a nice slower fermentation. But just to kind of give you an idea, we're going to set this to 95 degrees Fahrenheit and see how it operates. And I'm not going to wait very long, 30 minutes. Let's see what happens. And it looks like within 30 minutes, we were already at 94 Fahrenheit. Now notice my humidity though. My humidity did drop. I'm at 36%. When it comes to fermentation, especially salami, you kind of need a higher humidity. So if I were to use the CELR-12 to ferment salami, all I would do is wrap the salami in cling film and then stick it inside the CELR-12. The cling film takes care of, trapping in that humidity, giving you the high humidity that you need. But it looks like the temperature is held really well. When I put my hand in front of that unit, I am definitely getting a nice hot environment in here. That nice hot air is blowing over my hand. The drip tank is currently facing closed, so the holes are on the inside. And I want you to look at what's going on in here. Now, currently, there's 36% humidity inside of here. We did technically have it in the closed position, so that's the face with no holes facing out. What I'm going to do is turn that around and see how big of a difference that makes to the humidity at these fermenting temperatures. So we're going to put that right on back. Now we have the holes facing out. That water has been collecting inside of that drip tank. Let's go ahead and shut it down and see what it looks like after another 30 minutes. All right, so changing the direction of that drip tank definitely impacted the humidity. It increased it by close to 30 points. It's now 63% instead of 36%. Now, with that being said, I still prefer a higher humidity for fermentation, so I would more than likely still wrap the salami with cling film and then just stick it in the CELR-12. It'll ferment it no problem. Now, look, if you're doing kimchi, if you're doing beer, wine, sake, anything like that, then the humidity doesn't really matter all that very much, and you could use it as a beautiful fermentation chamber. Let's crank the heat up to its max temperature, 145 degrees Fahrenheit, and see if we can hit those targets. Now, I am going to take this little unit out because I don't think it can handle 145, but I am going to be placing a wireless thermometer from Thermomaven inside the ice chest to see how it reads. And after about an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes, it looks like we are at 145 degrees Fahrenheit with a humidity of 35%. The wireless probe inside the ice chest also verifies that information. 145 ambient, 144 on the tip. Absolutely perfect. Okay, so can we get to those higher temperatures in the 45 quart Arctic ice chest without a problem? And this little thermometer is actually quite hot. Okay, not a problem there. That means that you can use this to keep things warm. You can use it to cook. If you want to do a relatively long, low, and slow, or maybe even some snack sticks, you can actually cook them in this ice chest, set it to 145. Here's what we're going to do now. We're going to go in the opposite direction. We're going to bring this down all the way to refrigerator temperature and see how it handles that. Now, the one thing I did notice is that if you're trying to go from really hot, like 145 all the way down to 36, you're going to get this error message. And that just simply means that you need to wait until the block cools down a little bit before you can adjust it. That cool down period probably took 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then we were able to go ahead and continue lowering the temperature to where we wanted it. So that's what we're going to do right now. And I think for this mode, we're going to try the dry aging temperature, which is about 36 degrees Fahrenheit, 36 to 38 Fahrenheit. To dry age meat properly, you need refrigerator temperature with high humidity so that the meat doesn't dry out too much. So currently we're at 92 Fahrenheit. Let's wait a couple hours and see what the unit tells us. Okay, very good. Looks like within a couple of hours, we've dropped down to refrigerator temperature. We're now at 38 F. This has been hovering between 36 and 38, but notice my humidity, it's pretty low. And in my opinion, that's a little too low to dry age meat properly, but I'll share my thoughts with you on that in a minute. Let's look at the thermometer. The thermometer reads pretty much exactly what the base station reads, 36, 37 degrees Fahrenheit. So getting to that lower temperature is not a problem. And once again, we'll talk a little bit more about this here in just a minute. Let's go ahead and lower this down to below refrigerator temperatures, 28 degrees F. For this mode, I'm going to remove the thermometer and add a couple cups of water. Now, I do want to say that the CELR-12 does not claim to be able to turn your ice chest into a freezer, but I did want to see what happened if we stuck a couple of cups of water and had it set to technically freezing temperatures. Let's go ahead and see what happens here. I did let it sit a little bit longer for this particular mode, 5 hours, and it looks like we are at 29 Fahrenheit, kind of hovering between 28 and 29 Fahrenheit. Let's open up the ice chest and see what happened to that cup of water. 5 hours in the ice chest. Okay, there we go. So it looks like it started to freeze over as it should because it's a well-insulated ice chest, relatively small, kept that temperature nice and cold. And this is what 2 cups of water looks like in the ice chest with the temperature set to 28, 29 degrees Fahrenheit. Very nice. But once again, let me just reiterate, this is not intended to turn your ice chest into a freezer. At this setting, it's basically intended to keep whatever's in there very cold. There's one final setting on the base station, which is called the full setting. So if you turn it all the way low, you'll notice the word full show up on the screen, and all that's telling you is that the CELR-12 is on at 100%. Under normal operation, the CELR-12 is cycling through different protocols. It's defrosting, it's cooling, but under the full mode, it's just cooling at full throttle. It's not cycling off. And that particular mode is intended if you have, let's say, an ice chest full of beverages, you want to keep them nice and cold, and people are constantly opening and closing the ice chest to get drinks. This mode is perfect because it just keeps it on very cold, keeping everything nice and frosty. Okay, so that's the breakdown for all the different modes on the CELR-12. Let me go ahead and share a few finishing thoughts with you.
All right, guys, I've made some notes as we wrap this video up. I just wanted to make sure that we brought a comprehensive review, covered all the bases. I'm sure I'm still going to miss some things. So at any moment, if you have a question regarding the CELR-12 or my experience, please drop me a comment in the comment section below. Let's start with the most obvious question. Can the CELR-12 take your existing home ice chest and turn it into a refrigerator, a dry curing cabinet, a warming box? The easy answer is yes. As you saw in this video, we were able to hit all of our temperature targets, but there is a bit of an asterisk next to that. The higher quality cooler you have, the better the CELR-12 is going to work. So if you have a Yeti, an Arctic, certain Colemans that have really good insulation, your CELR-12 isn't going to have to work as hard to reach those targets because the ice chest itself is going to be able to maintain those temperatures, whether it's, 145 or even 28, 29 degrees Fahrenheit. If your cooler doesn't have good insulation, then the CELR-12 is going to have to work even harder to try and hit those targets. So the lower the quality of the cooler, the less likely it is to be able to experience the full temperature range of the CELR-12. And that brings me to another point. There is a sweet spot when it comes to the size of the cooler that you use with the CELR-12. You can obviously put the CELR-12 in any size cooler that you want, but if you stick with a 45 quart like the one we used in today's video, 50 quart or even 60 quart, you are going to be able to really maximize the CELR-12 and take full benefit of all of its functions. The bigger your cooler gets, the harder it's going to be for the CELR-12 to hit those extreme temperatures. So if you are somebody that really wants the CELR-12 because you want to get into that 28, 29 Fahrenheit zone, you want to stick with a 45, 50, or 60 quart unit. Same goes with the higher end. If you want to be in that 140, 145 Fahrenheit range, whether you're proofing, you're dehydrating, or maybe you're doing low temperature cooking, it's going to be very hard if you have a 100 plus quart cooler. So stick with 45, 50, or 60 quarts. But if you're only going to be dry curing meats and you don't really need those extreme temperatures, you could put the CELR-12 in a 100, 150, 175 quart cooler. You can actually even put it into a small refrigerator, put the block part inside the fridge and then have the base station on the outside, and that'll turn a small refrigerator into a dry curing chamber without any issues at all. There's a couple things that I really like about this unit. The first is the versatility. The CELR-12 has 4 basic functions. The first is the refrigeration mode, and that's keeping everything between 28, 29, and 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Perfect for your drinks if you're at the beach, the barbecue, the pool, get-togethers, whatever. People are opening and closing your cooler and you want to make sure that everything is nice and cold. I found that the CELR-12 performed beautifully. The second is the ice-free mode, which keeps everything at refrigeration temperature. This is perfect if you're doing a get-together or you're hosting a party and you want to keep ingredients cold, but you don't have a lot of space. You could do kind of like mise en place in your cooler, turn it to that mode. It keeps everything nice and cold. You can also dry age at this particular temperature. Now for me, and the reason I say that is because everyone's experience is going to be slightly different. Where you live in the world, the environmental conditions where you place your CELR-12, all of those impact how the CELR-12 works. For me, under that dry aging condition, I didn't get the humidity that I felt I needed to dry age meat properly. You really need 75, 80%. One thing I did do, and I'm telling you this because there's always a workaround. In my case, the humidity was too low at that 36, 38 Fahrenheit temperature. So I took a cup with 2 cups of water in it and a sponge that stuck out halfway. That sponge is there to wick out the moisture. I just stuck it right in the corner of the cooler, and I noticed very quickly that the humidity spiked to about 60+%. Now I know that at that 60+% humidity mark, the minute I put a primal in there to begin dry aging it, the moisture from that primal is going to spike the humidity, especially in that closed cooler, and I'm going to get that 70 to 80, probably even 85% humidity that I'm looking for. So for me, if I want to dry age beef, I'm going to have to make sure that I put a little cup of water in there, or maybe even put my beef on top of a water pan so that it can dry age with the appropriate amount of humidity. Where you live, you might not have to do that, but for me, if I want to dry age meat, that's what I got to do. The third function is the cooling function, and that maintains a temperature of about 45 to 65 Fahrenheit in your ice chest. And honestly, that's kind of where I'm at with the CELR-12. If I'm going to use the CELR-12, it's almost exclusively going to be to dry cure meat, to ferment things like beer, alcohol, wine, even salami. And then, of course, maybe to do some low temperature cooking, some proofing, some warming, take a brisket out of the smoker, stick it in the ice chest and set it to 140 or whatever. That's really the zone that I'm going to be hanging out in. And as for the cooling function, I thought it worked beautifully. I mean, you saw the results of the charcuterie that we put in there. Absolutely amazing. It held the temperature, no problem, very consistently over a 6 to 8 week period. The humidity was higher than we normally like it, right? We normally like it at about 80%. It kind of averaged at about 89, 90%, but that's okay. A lot of times we get sort of stuck in this habit where we think it has to be this one thing, and anything outside that parameter is not acceptable. But you got to remember, the CELR-12 is not only increasing the humidity, but it's also increasing the airflow. You've got that fan that's blowing that either cool or hot air all the time. So when you have increased airflow, you kind of almost need to have increased humidity to balance that out. If you were to have less of either one of those, then it wouldn't work. If you had less airflow but increased humidity, you would never dry. You would never get to your weight. If you had less humidity but increased airflow, you would get case hardening like crazy. But the balance, and I don't know if it was intentional or accident, the balance of airflow and humidity that was provided during that cooling stage, that dry curing stage, absolutely perfect. And for me, that really is the heart and soul of this particular unit, at least how I would use it. I know other people might use it for other things, but to have a functional dry curing cabinet in my ice chest is absolutely brilliant. Matter of fact, I don't know if you saw the last video that we made, we had an issue with our sausage maker's dry curing cabinet where we had to take it out of commission for about 2 weeks. And I took all of the products that were in our dry curing cabinet from the sausage maker and kept it in our ice chest using the CELR-12. That ought to tell you everything you need to know about how I trust the CELR-12's capability of dry curing meat. The fourth and final function is the heating function, and this is where you're getting to temperatures over 65 Fahrenheit up to 145 Fahrenheit, depending on the size of your ice chest. And in this stage, you could do everything from fermenting, proofing, if you have bread, sourdough, things like that. If you want to make beer, wine, you could do any kind of dehydrating. And the reason you could do dehydrating so well is because you do have that constant airflow, but the elevated temperature. Biltong box. You can actually make this into a pretty interesting biltong box without a problem whatsoever. And then, of course, on the high end, it becomes a warming box. It becomes a low temperature cooker. If you wanted to do snack sticks from beginning to end, you can pop them in there, ferment them, dry them, and then cook them all in the same ice chest. It's actually pretty incredible. So the versatility of this particular unit is kind of impressive. For me, there are a couple tiny limitations, like not being able to control the humidity. And I understand that being able to control the humidity comes with a price tag. If Tablesmith wanted to redesign their unit to be able to accurately control the humidity, which is incredibly difficult, by the way, it would not be priced the way that it is. As it stands, I think most of the functions work beautiful.
The only two issues that I have are the low humidity during dry aging and the fermenting, which can easily be overcome with a simple workaround.
And when it comes to dry aging, all I would do is add a tray of water and then put my primal directly on top of it on a rack. If you're going to ferment things like kimchi, sauerkraut, if you're going to make beer, wine, then the humidity doesn't matter. But when it comes to salami, the workaround here is just to wrap your salami with cling film and then stick it in the ice chest with the CELR-12.
The humidity during the dry curing phase where we did our meat, well, that worked perfect. And for me, that was the most important part.
Another thing that I like about it, as weird as this sounds, is how compact it is. All you have is the base station and the block. And so if you're not using it in your ice chest, you can store it relatively easy, unlike having an actual dedicated drying chamber, whether it's a DIY or whether it's one that you bought, where if you're not using it, it still kind of takes up a lot of space. With the CELR-12, you can disassemble it, put it up. I mean, it just honestly takes up very little room. And then now you have your ice chest back. So the compactability of this unit is pretty appealing, and that brings me to the price. In this space, you have a couple options, especially if you're into dry curing or dry aging meat. You could build your own unit. That's a DIY unit. Depending on the cost of a fridge, a humidifier, dehumidifier, and a humidity and temperature controller, the quality of each one of those components, you could spend anywhere from, realistically, $300 to $600, $700, even $800. And even then, you're still going to have to build it. And let me just tell you from experience, there's no one size fits all for dry curing chambers. Every refrigerator, every chamber is going to act different. So you have to be able to know how to troubleshoot it. So there's your DIY version. You have dedicated units, small ones like the one from Pro Smokers, start at $1,100, $1,200, and then the bigger the unit gets, obviously the more costly. The one from the sausage makers, in something to the tune of about $3,000 or $4,000. The problem with most of these units is that they're very singular in function. And so if I have, let's say a DIY dry curing cabinet that cost me $700 to build, it's only ever going to be a dry curing cabinet, whereas the CELR-12 has a lot more versatility. So the last thing that I really like about this particular unit is the price compared to its versatility. I believe right now, and don't quote me on this, but I think that the price for the CELR-12 is somewhere around $600. We will have a discount code in the description box below that takes $50 off your purchase. So as of right now, the price for the CELR-12 is around $550, which makes it a pretty appealing option for those of you who not only want to get into dry aging, but also dry curing and fermenting and all sorts of other things that you could do with the CELR-12. And there you go, folks. That is my review for the CELR-12. How I particularly use this unit, I love it. I got to be completely honest, I was not expecting to like it as much as I did. I honestly felt like this was going to be a disaster. And after each dry curing project that we did, I was increasingly blown away. So if you're looking for something to get into dry curing meats without making this enormous investment, something that's versatile, compact, and it's got a slightly better price tag than some of the other options on the market, you definitely want to look at the CELR-12. I'll put a link to their business in the description box below. And something that you need to know about the CELR-12, something I did not know before, but I'm going to tell you right now. If you happen to buy one, you get a 100-day risk-free trial period. Now that means that you could buy one today, and 100 days later, if for whatever reason it does not do what you want it to do, if it does not work out the way that you hoped it would work out, you could return it. No questions asked. That's what I'm talking about. That's like old school customer service. If you got any questions about the CELR-12, about today's project, or if you want to see some of the videos that we made utilizing the CELR-12, I'll put links to those videos in the description box below, and then maybe right here, right here, right here, right here, something like that. I'll put suggestions at the very end of this video. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Be sure to stick around for more content like this. We've got a lot of really cool dry curing projects, so be sure to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. And if you like today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Thanks for being here. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.